Hey guys, it's Bazz, and as you already know, I'm a guy who likes his albums. However, from time to time, there's always one that misses the mark for whatever reason. Like, if my haircut was an album, would you give it a positive review? Yeah, me neither.
Ah yes, Anthony Fantano, the self-proclaimed internet's busiest music nerd and host of the YouTube channel The Needle Drop. Although he is one of the most popular internet personalities today, he is simultaneously one of the most hated and disrespected for one reason or another. Say what you will about him, but nobody can argue the amount of influence he has had on music journalism as a whole. Anthony has had his channel for just over a decade now, and I think he is one of those rare creators that has gotten better as time goes on. For the uninformed, I'll give a brief crash course onto Fantano's methodology. He rates various albums, EPs, and mixtapes on a 0 to 10 scale, and to further describe his personal enjoyment of said projects, he uses qualifiers such as light, decent, and strong. For example, in his now infamous review of Kanye West's album My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, he gave it a light 6, and I should probably start working on a petition to get that video removed from YouTube. He wears his signature yellow flannel when he enjoys a specific record, and a red flannel for ones he usually dislikes. Additionally, albums that receive a 0 or a 10 don't happen often, but every time they drop, they're a treat to watch for obvious reasons. However, out of all of his video reviews, there's one subcategory that has always been mystifying to me and fellow fans alike: the not good scores. Here's a quick snippet from a Fantano video explaining what those reviews are all about.
Not good is more of a classification than it is a literal interpretation of those two words. Of course, an album that is 0 out of 10, in my opinion, would be not good. When I do a review where I categorize a record as an album that is worthy of this playlist over here, I'm essentially saying that this project is a non-starter. It is a non-starter, and that is that.
See, I used to think that not good was more of a subjective rating. Was an album a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3? After rewatching that video, and considering that I haven't listened to many of those records, I figured I'd throw my hat into the ring and see if I think that Fantano's not good scores are good, or, well, not good. For reference, I talk about the albums I like the most first, and the least last. Here are his 6 most popular reviews of this type, and my thoughts on each. I was honestly really surprised that this ended up getting the not good label from Anthony, because I really liked a fair amount of the material on here. I can understand his dislike for the weird mashing of genres like cloud, emo, and trap rap, but the overall criticisms of Lil Peep being depressed for the sake of being depressed were a bit too harsh in my eyes. I'll definitely agree that I think some of the motifs can be a bit cheesy on here, but come on, are you really expecting this to match up with records like A Crow Looked at Me? I feel like that's a bit of a stretch. Let's get into the track list now. I was already familiar with 2 of the 7 songs, You Said and Better Off, but I also came to like Ben Struck, The Bright Side, and Problems. To have enjoyed 5 of the 7 songs on here was more than I would have thought, fully knowing Fantano's distaste with the otherwise generic instrumentals and vocals. Considering that I don't even enjoy emo music that much, that reflects more on how much I didn't agree with some of the things he said. Of course, there are definitely some moments that weren't in good taste, specifically Lil Tracy's feature on the otherwise promising Awful Things, and the regression in Peep's vocals on Save That Shit. So yeah, Come Over When You're Sober isn't genre-defining or an overtly sad masterpiece that Fantano and other outlets were expecting it to be, but it's a decently short album that's worth at least a listen or two.
Yikes!
Now, this is where everything starts going to shit. In fairness, I won't lie that I actually used to be an Imagine Dragons fan back in the day. Their 2012 debut, Night Visions, is a pretty solid pop rock effort if I'm being honest. After listening to this album and going through Fantano's review, I was pretty shocked to hear him say that he thought most of their discography is too dramatic. See, I find it very hard to believe that he never rocked out to It's Time or On Top of the World, even if they are over-dramatic or too simple. Night Visions era Imagine Dragons is honestly when their music felt the most pure and interesting. Origins, however, is anything but. To Fantano's point, it's sad that they've definitely become soulless and no longer have a clear identity as a band. Across the 50-odd minutes of this thing, I was in the same boat as him. I couldn't quite figure out if this was an EDM record, a folk record, or a pop ballad record. I enjoyed Boomerang and Cool Out because they were probably the closest to what the band has built themselves up to be for the past few years. Fantano didn't talk too highly about either, which is fine, but I will side with him that some of the production across the record is very overblown, specifically on Natural, Bad Liar, Bullet in a Gun, Digital, and Birds, to name a few. Out of everything on here, I think Dan Reynolds' otherwise underwhelming vocal and lyrical efforts were a testament to how soulless the band has actually become. He's a complete shell of what he was on the debut some 9 years ago, and it leads me to wonder how much worse he'll sound on the band's newest album releasing later this year. While the band does come to their own with a few good moments across the record, I ultimately agree that Origins was deserving of the not good seal from Anthony Fantano.
Who don't want it?
Many longtime fans will know that I'm pretty critical of artists who use their fame just to change their sound for whatever reason, because more often than not, it fails. Badly. And Supermarket by Logic is no exception. He was just clearly not prepared to make the transition to rock music at all. Even though there is a fair amount of rap on this, by God, everything just comes off as a hot mess. His understanding of rock as a whole is very diluted, and Fantano is definitely right that Logic's songwriting and singing abilities are just atrocious. When you look at someone like Kid Cudi, who made a similar transition to rock music with Wizard, at least he had the distinction of being somewhat vocally talented. Even if he isn't, at least he went out of his way to masquerade his efforts with autotune. For as high profile of a musician as Logic is, I can't be convinced he was ultimately proud with the way everything turned out. I enjoyed Baby quite a bit and both Mac DeMarco collabs. I'm probably gonna Rock Your World and Vacation for myself. To me, they were the most interesting compositions on here and worked pretty well with Logic's style. If we had gotten a record that was more DIY or bedroom poppy, it could have been more positive for him. More importantly, it would have justified the raw-ish sound of the album that Fantano was critiquing. Anyways, Supermarket is far from the worst album on this list, but it's certainly not good.
Oh no!
To spare you of everything, Total Xanarchy was another dumpster fire of a record, but to give credit where credit's due, I didn't mind a fair amount of the instrumentals. Unfortunately, they're completely ruined by Lil Xan's presence on them. Seriously, could there be any worse of a guy to put on them? His voice is so incredibly unappealing, and the same applies to his lyrics. Fantano's claim on them being totally dumbed down and repetitive as all hell is completely valid. Out of the 16 total cuts, I really enjoyed 2 where he was the lone rapper, Diamonds and Saved by the Bell. They're really the only time where he manages to sound close to listenable. I also feel bad for some of the artists that somehow decided it was a good idea to hop onto this project, namely 2 Chainz, YG, and Charlie XCX. As Anthony suggested, they're mainly on here to add a sense of credibility to his music. In the same breath, some of the collabs are honestly not that bad. I agree that Ray Shremmerd, as the track suggests, shine hard on their feature. I also really like Diplo's beat on Colorblind. It's probably one of the best parts of the album, if I'm being honest. Fantano's definitely right in the sense that Xan took a lot from Young Lean and the Sad Boy movement in the early 2010s, and hearing that reminded me of a time that one of my friends called Lil Xan better than Young Lean. That was about as bold of a claim as Richard Nixon's campaign slogan in 1968.
This time, vote like your whole world depended on it.
Oh, son of a bitch. I just realized that my history textbook is copyrighted from that year. Can somebody get me caught up on what's happened since then?
My bad.
Released in 2019 as a parody of the band's famous 1979 album and subsequent 1982 film of the same name, the famed internet comedian Doug Walker should have thought twice before making this parody. I've always thought he was kind of annoying to begin with, but this just puts his character in a true light. I really don't understand what he had found funny in an otherwise important piece of art and social commentary. I enjoy the Pink Floyd rendition quite a bit, and even a simple Google search will tell you all of the deeper meaning about the album as a whole. Similar to Logic, he has little to no overall understanding of the respective medium he's working in as a whole. While we're at it, let's compare Walker's efforts to someone like Weird Al Yankovic. For close to 40 years now, Weird Al has mastered the art of satire, and the bands who are parodied by him are genuinely happy that he could make something funny from their art. Even when he does do wall-style tributes to specific bands, they're surprisingly faithful to the source material and always a blast to listen to. One could only imagine Roger Waters' reaction to Walker's phony recreation of his music. His vocals are pathetic across the entirety of the record and get even more irritating the deeper you progress. The instrumental assistance from fellow YouTuber Rob Scallon is fine, I guess, but all of his efforts get overshadowed by the overall annoyingness of the album. Fantano is right in my eyes. This is simply not good. I did not find myself enjoying this in any capacity. Maybe I take that back. I think the fact that the SpongeBob SquarePants theme capped off the record could be the best moment on here.
I made a boo-boo, yeah.
So, remember the guy that played Mouth in the Goonies and Teddy in Stand By Me? Yeah, now the dude is so desperate to get back into the public that he put out one of the most dreadful albums in recent memory, and easily the worst album of the bunch. This is actually one of Fantano's longest and most popular uploads, and again, there's no surprise why. To be terse, angelic to the core is 95 insufferable minutes of repulsive instrumentals, god-awful lyrics and vocals, and a copious amount of autotune. Not to mention it's completely incoherent, as Feldman was really unable to make up his mind about what type of project he wanted to make. I think the recurring theme is that artists on this list seem to have very little understanding about the genres they worked with, because I bet you Feldman didn't even pick up an instrument or put any thought into the music when he was making this album. The dance portion of this record is so aggravatingly bad, not to mention the rock portion being equally as abysmal, if not worse. If it's not the music itself that's your favorite, then it's got to be the features from past prime musicians like Fred Durst, Snoop Dogg, or Corrupt, right? So yeah, this might have been the cream of the crap out of all the not good records on this list. It's so bad that I can't even pick a song I'd recommend to you for the life of me. If anything, I strongly suggest that you listen to this record not for pleasure's sake, but for amusement and amusement only. And that's not something I often say, which is why breaking down these last few albums was not a very fruitful exercise. Sure, it's one thing to wail on an artist for 10 odd minutes like Fantano does, but I feel like it's important to try and find at least a few positives within the albums I review. While I did agree with Fantano with the majority of the thoughts on these albums, what if you didn't? I feel like that brings us to the biggest crux of the video. I think a lot of people out there might not like Fantano because he comes off as having the end-all, say-all of a specific album. In reality, we have to have a mutual respect towards each other. I know Anthony's not going to like all of my favorite albums, and I know that I might not like his favorite albums. It goes without saying that everyone doesn't have the same experience with music as someone else does, hence why it's valuable to watch his content for a perspective on music that might not always be what you expect.
You know what? I've had a change of heart. This video taught me that sometimes you just have to get through the bad stuff in life to appreciate the goodness of it all. I'm not gonna wear this hat anymore. I shouldn't be ashamed about how I look. I'm gonna take it off and let the world see me for who I really am. Oh, and somebody found me this new history textbook, and let me just say, this Richard Nixon presidency, it's not good.